After acquiring a suitably British form of transportation, I headed across the border into Wales. Took in a few medieval castles and made my way to Bala, one of the few Welsh towns I could pronounce. It lies just inside Snowdonia National Park, and it's where I met up with Meurig, one of the very few capable performers of this intriguing ancient instrument, the Crwth.
Yeah, so this is a medieval Welsh instrument that's been sort of resurrected, I suppose. But it's an exact replica of some old ones we've got. So and we know how it was tuned actually, because at the time when the Crwth was dying out, which was in the 18th century, people took an interest in it and they recorded the tuning. So it's quite unusual, really. You've got a flat bridge, so you're constantly playing a chord, and the tuning is I've got mine set down a couple of notes. So I'm in A, so I'll give you what mine is. I think the original was tuned in C, but 2 E's, 2 A's, and 2 B's.
Wow, that's quite interesting. And I guess the technical term is re-entrant tuning, where it's not always in order of ascending like a lot of other string instruments.
Absolutely, and the reason for that is the flat bridge, really. So you're constantly bowing a chord, so you're either fingering these two together. You see these two go off the fingerboard, so those drones, those are genuine drones, and these two, you either finger those or you finger these, and depending which ones you finger, you get a different chord.
Oh,
so
right.
it kind of goes. This is what it wants to do most of the time. That kind of sound, but if you play the middle ones, you get. So that's the reason, really, for the tuning. I've tried various different tunings as well. I do detune these down to a D sometimes, which gives you a different sort of configuration, a different chord.
Right, yeah.
And of course within that you can get all sorts of different chords, because you can split the octave and and if you want to go up and down and get more than 5 notes, then you just go up and down the fingerboard. That gets you to the octave there.
And so you're saying it was the interest in it was kind of waning in 18th century, did you say?
Yeah, I mean the Crwth's been around a heck of a long time. It belongs to the lyre family, so it was originally a plucked instrument without a fingerboard. But that's back in Roman times in Britain. It goes right back to then, references to the Crwth. And then sometime in the Dark Ages it developed the fingerboard, so you could finger it separately.
Right. So it was essentially developed from an instrument that had more strings along the...
I'm not entirely sure how many strings it had, to be honest, originally, but you would have plucked them individually.
Right.
And then developed fingerboards so you could finger them and pluck them. And then eventually, as bowed instruments developed, they also started bowing the Crwth.
Right, interesting.
And then it sort of reached its present form during the Middle Ages. That's the heyday of the Crwth, really.
Right.
It was an instrument of the aristocracy in Wales in the Middle Ages.
Right.
Not really a folk instrument, kind of an art instrument, really.
Interesting.
And then it grew. It went out of fashion when the violin came, really, which was 17th century, and gradually lost the old repertoire, and the country dancing style tunes took over, and of course the violins, hugely more flexible and it's got more volume and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it gradually died out through the 18th century, and then hung on in a few pockets, and then various kind of antiquarians got interested in it. So it never quite entirely died out, but it died out as a living thing, if you know what I mean. It became something of antiquarian interest.
Right, but it's interesting how you said that maybe people were aware that it was actually declining, so they wrote down the tunings, and I guess the canon of tunes still exists as well from.
Well, we've got we've got the tunings. We've actually got things written down about the techniques of playing as well, and also poetry which describes the music of the Crwth and so on. So it's quite a lot to work with, really. And there are lists of tunes from the Middle Ages of what Crwth players played, but I mean, a lot of them have gone. You know, they weren't notating them then. There's one famous manuscript of harp music from early 17th century Wales, which is medieval repertoire really, but some of that would have been played on the Crwth, most of it doesn't really fit, you know.
Interesting.
So when I look back and I look for old pieces, I'm looking into the 18th century fiddle manuscripts and looking for the old tunes within that, really. And
right.
There's plenty to work with, you know, plenty of old song tunes as well. You have to go with what the Crwth can do as well, because it can't do everything by a long shot. It's in that medieval sound world of hurdy-gurdies and bagpipes and instruments like that have got an octave range and drones.
Yes.
That's what it does. So you have to work within that.
Yeah. And so today, do you play it solo? What's a common way that you combine it with other instruments? How does it work today, I guess?
Well, I've used it in various different combinations. I mean, mostly I play it solo. I also accompany myself singing with it. I've used it in bands, folk bands. It's not a great band instrument because it only plays in one key for some reason, and also the tone of it isn't very. It doesn't penetrate the other instruments really. It's just this kind of, it becomes a texture in the band, which is not the most exciting thing to do really.
Yeah.
But, I mainly play it solo really.
And as you noted, the bridge is flat.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So it allows you to play these, more than double. I was going to say double stops, like as you would say.
Oh,
in violin,
more than allows you to. You
Yeah.
have to. You can't not. You can't play separate strings. You know,
Yeah.
you're constantly bowing 6 strings all the time, and that's the sound of it, really.
Yes, yeah, and I guess that's the real strength as well, because it does have a lovely warmth when you hear it solo.
But I mean, back in the Middle Ages, they used it for all sorts of things. They used it for as a background to declaiming poetry, big thing in Wales.
Right.
And they used it for to sing with. They used it for dancing, to accompany dancing as well. So back in the day, before they had amplification.
Yes, right. Yeah, and so would you get multiple ones playing together, or do we have any sources about how it was used in that context?
We have a few pictures. We have pictures of, I can think of one of 2 Crwth players playing together, one of a Crwth player and a bagpipe player, and I believe it was used with harp as well, but we're talking the medieval bray harp rather than the modern ones, which was a completely different sound really.
Interesting, yeah.
I got quietly excited when Cass told me all the strings had unique Welsh names.
Back in the day, they didn't have tuning forks. They tuned them as high as they would go into the other instruments. But they gave them names. So this is the cywair dance, which in Welsh means the tuning string, really, the key string. That gives it, and that is actually the tonic of the scale. And then this is the crastant, which means the sharp string.
Okay, yeah.
And then you've got the llorf dance, which means the crowd, literally.
The crowd.
The noise in the background, you know, and that's and as you see, it goes off the fingerboard there, so that is a constant drone.
It's the drone, so it's kind of the background to the melody, I guess. In some
it
ways.
is. Although one interesting thing that we know about from poetry written about the Crwth is that they plucked the strings as well as they were playing as a sort of rhythmic accompaniment.
Interesting. And do you ever use any of that? I guess it's quite a special technique. Yeah.
Yes, it took a bit of it was a bit, patting your head and rubbing your stomach to learn that one. But I do use that quite a lot as a rhythmic thing, yeah.
And as if the Crwth wasn't interesting and unusual enough, Cass told me that there are only a handful of musicians who could still play the instrument.
I would say there's probably half a dozen who can play it well in Wales, and maybe another half a dozen who own a Crwth and do a bit with it.
Right.
And then there's interest out there in America and various places, people who have got an interest in early instruments, because there's that crowd as well. But it's not a big thing,
Yes.
I've taught a few people, but how much they play, I'm not sure.
Yeah. And what got you interested in it in the first place?
Oh, well, I'm a fiddle player, I was interested, and I was doing some research into Welsh fiddle music. First thing I learned when I started learning the Crwth was just how different it was. And even the bow stroke, the position, we know all about the position, that it was like this, and you used a strap and so on. But boy, that's a different place to the violin, and your bow's going up and down, little short bow, as opposed to a cross and having it's completely different technique, really.
And where did you get this particular instrument?
Well, this is a reproduction instrument. So the original that looks exactly like this is in the National Library in Aberystwyth, National Library of Wales. There's one in St Fagans as well, and there's a couple of others around. But this is the most playable one, really. So I got someone a guy called, it was called Guy, in fact, Guy Flockhart, that was his name, to copy exactly the measurements of the original. So I got it made in Cardiff. It's quite an interesting technique to make it as well. This is the original Crwth playing, Crwth technique for making Crwths, which is actually a single block of wood, and it's carved out of that. And you can see that there's this turn on the edge. So the original block of wood came right up here. It's quite a big block of wood.
Right.
And then the belly is actually, it's carved out, the inside of it, like a boat, really.
Yeah.
And then the belly is just laid on top.
And we've got, we can infer that from the original?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And also from the poetry, it talks about that. And it talks about it being made from sycamore, which this is in fact sycamore, with a holly fingerboard.
Yeah, it's close to the real thing. Well, I guess
so
it is the real thing.
It is the real McCoy. This is what they were like, and this is what they sounded like. So this is quite an interesting tune. It's called Min Meurig, which means by Mary, and it's actually an old carol tune from the days when Wales was still a Catholic country, which is a long time ago now. And it's a sort of invocation of Mary, I suppose, and all the saints. So it fits really rather nicely on the Crwth, so I thought I'd learn that one.
Thanks for watching. Click on the links for more interviews, follow us on Facebook, or subscribe.